Alright, so this lesson today is linear transformations. Title it, linear transformations. I'm going to give you a little explanation on what this lesson is about. Then I'll show you what I want on the worksheet. So linear transformation is simple. All you're trying to do is come up with an equation of a line after you move it. So for example, let's say you start off with this line and you want to move it 2 units down. Then you grab any 2 points and move it 2 units down. Draw your new line. So the goal of this lesson is to come up with the equation of the new line, of that blue line. You with me? So there's beginning steps to this. The first thing we're going to do is simply just practice all the different rules, writing all the rules or telling me which rules are they. So in this case, the first rule we're going to talk about is vertical transformation, which goes in 2 directions. Vertical moves up or down. Copy this down. Everything I copy, you copy. Up is positive, down is minus. Copy that down. So if I tell you to move a line up or down, that's a vertical transformation. Up is positive, down is minus. Pretty simple. Now let me explain to you how this rule looks. To be considered a vertical transformation, the number has to be outside of the parentheses. So here are a couple examples that we can talk about. F of x plus 2. Since the plus 2 is not in the parentheses, we know it's going to be vertical, 2 units, up or down. Which one is it? Is that going to be up 2 units or down 2 units? Up 2 units, because it's a positive 2. So, what do you think f of x minus 6 is? How many units in what direction?
6 units down.
6 units down. Very good. That's it. This first rule is that simple. Whatever number's after the f of x tells you if it's up or down that many numbers, that many boxes. So far, so good? Copy it down. Oh, where's constants? I thought you were a con student. You're Michael. I thought you were a con student. That's why I was literally like checking if you're working. I'm glad you're here. You've been slacking at home. Alright, so everybody gets this so far? If not, ask me at any moment. If you see a plus number there, it's up. If you see minus a number outside the parentheses, it's down. Now let's go to the next one. On the next category, it's called horizontal. So the line is being moved horizontally. So horizontal moves in what 2 directions? Right and left. But now, here's something you have to pay attention to. Everybody forgets this. Horizontal is always backwards. So right usually is positive numbers, but horizontal is backwards. So right is going to be minus, left is going to be plus. But now, how does this rule look compared to the vertical rule? Watch. The only difference is, instead of the number being outside the parentheses, the number is inside the parentheses. So for example, this one over here, you look at it and you say, okay, I know it's horizontal. I know it's 2 units. But in what direction is plus 2 moving? Right 2 or left 2?
Left.
Left 2, because left is plus, and that says plus. So 2 units left. That's all I want you to do on today's worksheet. You're writing this underneath the rule like that. So, on the second example, you know it's horizontal, 6 units in what direction?
Right.
Right, 6 units, very good. Because it's minus 6 in there, and minus means right. So far so good. Anybody have any questions on vertical and horizontal rules? Now the next part is going to be a mixture of both. So for example, I'm going to tell you something like this. So in this case, the number is not in the parentheses. The number is in the parentheses. It's 2 different movements. So when this happens, that just means the same thing we just reviewed, but you're moving 2 different ways. So like up 2, right 3, down 4, left 6, whatever it is. So first of all, if the number's in the parentheses, you know that has to be right or left. So because it's plus 2, I know it's going to be left 2 and minus 4 outside the parentheses means down 4. So left 2, down 4. Done. What is this one going to be? The second example. Somebody other than George, try this one out. What direction? Try, Mike. This one. Is that going to be right or left? Right. Very good. Right 3. And how much would plus 5 be out there? If it's in the parentheses, it's right or left. If it's not, it's up or down. So what is that? You know this one has to be up or down. Up, 5. Very good. That's it. So far, so good? Okay, on the next one here, there's only 2 different types left. This one is called reflections. So for reflections, there's no units. You're not going to have 3 units, 4 units, 5 units. You're not going to have units at all. For reflections, you're either going to have an x-axis reflection or a y-axis reflection. So, you have to memorize how these look. Remember, these don't have units, so you're just going to see a negative somewhere. So, x-axis reflection is negative f of x, which means the negative 1 is outside of the parentheses. For the y-axis reflection, it's f of negative x. The negative 1 is in the parentheses. So for today's worksheet, all you're going to write is x-axis reflection if you see that, y-axis reflection if you see this. That's it. But I do want to explain to you how this changes an equation. So let's say the original equation is y equals positive 2x plus 3. That means that, let's say it's an x-axis reflection. That means negative 1 has to be multiplied by the whole equation, which is 2x plus 3. If you multiply both by negative 1, it becomes negative 2x minus 3. Look at the original equation and look at what we have now. What happened to that? The numbers didn't change, but both signs change. Okay, negative, negative, positive, positive, both signs change. But now on a y-axis reflection, only the x value gets multiplied by negative 1. So that'd be negative 1 times 2x, and you bring down your plus 3. So on a y-axis reflection, only the slope changes signs. So only slope changes signs. Copy down. Alright, now we get to the last one. The last section is vertical stretch or compression and horizontal stretch and compression. So these are the two sections: vertical stretch or compression, horizontal stretch or compression. Now let me show you how the rule looks. The rule is this: if the number's outside of the parentheses, like this, or like this. So these two examples, write them down. Now, if you multiply something by 3, you make it bigger. Anytime you multiply something by something bigger than 1, it makes it bigger. Bigger would make a stretch happen. So when the number's outside the parentheses, you're going to call it vertical stretch or compression. If it's bigger than 1, we call it a vertical stretch. If it's smaller than 1, like this fraction, then we call it a vertical compression. So how do you actually finish labeling it? The first one would say vertical stretch by a factor of 3. The second example would be vertical compression by a factor of 1/2. But now, what if the number is in the parentheses like this? Right? If it's in the parentheses, now you no longer call it vertical. You have to call it horizontal. But here's the key. What do I always say about horizontal? It's backwards. So if you multiply it by a number bigger than 1, instead of being a stretch, it's actually going to be a compression. And if you multiply it by something smaller than 1, instead of being a compression, it's going to be a horizontal stretch. This is the end of the transformation rules. On the next page, I'm just going to put a bunch of random ones, and we'll practice with them using quick fire here, so you understand what I'm expecting on the worksheet. So here's a few examples that we can practice. F of x plus 2 f of x minus 10. F of x plus 4. F of x minus 5. Alright, here are a couple examples we can practice. So, if the number is not in the parentheses, you know it's going to be vertical. Vertical moves in what two directions? Up and down. So this one here would be up 2 units. Done. This one here would be down 10. Anybody confused on the vertical side? Those two are vertical because the number is outside of the parentheses. The next two are horizontal, which means you're going to put right or left. So this would be left 4 because it's plus 4. If it's minus 5, that's going to be right 5. Everybody with me? Now here, when the negative is outside of the parentheses, it's an x-axis reflection. When the negative is inside the parentheses, it's a y-axis reflection. So we already got most of those answers. Now on the bottom, you either had a vertical compression or stretch, or a horizontal compression or stretch. So if the number is outside the parentheses, we're going to call it vertical, and vertical is normal. A number bigger than 1 is going to be a stretch. A number smaller than 1 is going to be a compression. Now the next one's going to be a horizontal stretch or compression. Horizontal is always backwards. So a number that's a fraction is going to be a stretch. And the number that's bigger than 1 is actually going to be a compression. Any questions so far?